Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today on Market Journal. I'm Bryce Duskin. Over the past several months, we've been tracking and sharing updates on the crop harvest here in Nebraska. Corn and soybean harvests have all but wrapped up at this point, but for certain farmers in the state, harvest is just getting started. With Christmas around the corner, we start today's broadcast with a trip to Windmill Pines Christmas Tree Farm, which is located near Seward. The Choose and Cut Christmas Tree Farm has been in operation since 1968. Black Friday served as the opening day for the 2022 selling season at Windmill Pines. We learn more about selling Christmas trees in the Cornhusker State with co-owner Stan Obermueller. We're talking now with Stan Obermueller. He is the co-owner of Windmill Pines Christmas Tree Farm. Stan, thanks for letting us come out here to the farm. This is awesome.
You're very welcome. Glad to have you here.
Tell us a little bit about the history of the farm near Seward.
Well, my father-in-law started it back in 1968. We were privileged to help him plant the first trees on Easter Sunday afternoon. And then he ran the farm pretty much by himself, hired a little bit of labor. We were gone thereafter for 14 years and then came back in 1982. And since then, we have continually taken on more and more responsibilities until his passing. And now we are the owners of the place. So anyway, we have customers that love our trees, and so we've been blessed to have another really busy season this year.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. You opened up on Black Friday. How did the first weekend of sales go?
It was fantastic. The first day we had maybe 150 people at the gate ready to charge in. And so it's crazy the first morning. Then after that it steadies out, and so we had really nice steady business thereafter. And yeah, we're pretty much depleted on the cane and fir. Right behind us we have prairie now. It was forest on Friday morning at 9 o'clock.
Let me ask you this. There's a lot of options for people to buy when it comes to Christmas trees now. Not all of them real Christmas trees. Why do your customers keep returning to buy one of these trees?
A lot of it is tradition. It's a family thing. That's what they've done with, we have third and fourth generation people coming out now. This is what we've done. What they tell us, we love it here. Yeah, it's part of it's kind of the beginning of their Christmas celebration.
Well, over the past growing season, when it comes to corn and soybeans, we've been talking a lot about the drought and how that's impacted producers. I'm sure it's been impacting you guys here at Christmas Tree Farms as well.
Very definitely. Last winter was a really challenging time for us. We had no snow cover. We went into the winter with pretty dry ground. I didn't have much of my drip system in yet, and anyway, I had pretty massive winter kill, some of which I'll have to salvage, but most of them will just have to be trashed. I've done quite a bit of that already.
As we wrap up, let me ask you this. What do you enjoy about this industry and this business?
Well, sales is always a great time, just because of the delight of our customers and the positive feedback we get from them. But I'm a person that can't sit around at home. I like to read, but not that much. I played golf poorly. Don't want to do that either. So it's a nice place for me to work. I enjoy the physical activity. I'm an artist also. I know how to shape trees to what customers like. So There are times when it's hot and humid and swatting mosquitoes that it's not so great, but most of the time I really enjoy being out here.
Well, thanks for the time, Stan. We really appreciate it. Thanks to Stan for taking the time out of his day to join us for the show. The Christmas tree farm will be open this weekend. It's one of about 25 Christmas tree farms across the state. The Nebraska Department of Agriculture actually has an online directory for you to locate a tree farm near you. We'll share a link to that map online at our website. It's marketjournal.unl.edu. Moving along now, just before the Thanksgiving holiday, the Market Journal team was in Kansas City for the National Association of Farm Broadcasting Convention. While we were there, we had the opportunity to sit down with the president of the American Farm Bureau Federation, Zippy Duvall. Today we're catching up with the president of the American Farm Bureau Federation, that is Zippy Duvall. Zippy, we appreciate the time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, you guys are always up to a lot of things, and particularly as we gear up for another farm bill. I'm sure you've been busy having conversations about what that's going to be looking like. So tell us your thoughts on the upcoming farm bill, what that could look like.
Yeah, well, we've had a study group working 2 years with all our national affairs people from all across the country, working on what the gaps or the weaknesses in the last farm bill are. And then we've taken those recommendations that they brought forward to the board, and they've unanimously approved it. Now, I don't want to get in front of my delegates because we're going to National Convention in January, and I'm sure they will tweak and fine-tune those recommendations. So looking forward to basically protecting the crop insurance piece. It's the risk management tool that our farmers are using and are getting used to, and even more every year using it. And then in Title I, of course, I think our delegates will be looking at cost of production and whether or not those targets in Title I are at the correct level. Conservation, with all the conversation around climate, I know there'll be an emphasis put there, and you know, our people, if this market, voluntary market and incentive based, they'll be there to step up and take on those projects. But we don't want them to forget all the conservation tools that we have out there that haven't been funded to the correct amount up to this point, and hopefully that'll happen too.
As the American Farm Bureau, of course, representing all the states and the different geographic areas of the country, where we're at Nebraska and the Western Corn Belt really experiencing a lot of drought, cattle producers obviously seeing that as well. What are some of the other big challenges, though, that our viewers might not be familiar with that are facing American ag producers nationwide?
Well, you know, as I travel the country, and right now I'm going to state conventions, first thing everybody wants to talk about is input costs and availability of those inputs. And then a lot of discussion right now around transportation. Is there going to be a rail strike, or we're going to be able to head that off? And, you know, if they can't find common ground, we're going to be going to Congress asking them to intervene. In the, water, especially out west, availability of water, how's that money that was passed in the last, I think, in the Inflation Reduction Act, how's that water going to be used, and how will it help farmers and ranchers? Just so many areas, the labor, and the list just goes on and on that we talk about every day.
What have been some of the challenges working with the Biden administration with their priority areas and aligning them with where the American Farm Bureau is?
Well, you know, a lot of theirs is about diversity and climate. And in the climate area, we've tried to join up through the Food and Agriculture Climate Alliance, FACA. We were one of the founding members of that group to explore what we could come together and agree on with groups that don't really think like us a lot of times. We had food groups there, environmental groups, timber, agriculture, and we all sat down and found some common ground with 3 principles that really is guided by that voluntary market incentive-based programs, and went to Capitol Hill with it, and it actually dominated the conversation around climate and agriculture on Capitol Hill. Ended up being part of the climate smart pilot programs that USDA put out. So that was a great process that we went through with a lot of our friends and people that we should have been working with a long time ago to find common ground.
Coming up here in January, American Farm Bureau is traveling to Puerto Rico for the annual convention. Give us a preview of what's ahead there.
Hey, it's going to be a good time. You know, we're going to go eat some good food, enjoy their culture. They are happy people, and they're excited about us coming. I've met with the governor. I think we're going to be, if not the biggest convention they've ever had, one of the biggest. And they're really looking forward to us coming. I know they had a big storm there. Some people are worried about that. We've been on the ground and looked. All the hotels, the convention centers in good shape. We're ready to go. Going to eat some good food, have that fellowship. We're going to do the business of Farm Bureau like we always do. Get ready for 2023.
We'll have somebody there, so we'll look forward to
We'll
coverage.
look forward to you coming. Everybody needs to come. I think it's going to be cold in a lot of our country, and it's going to be beautiful and sunny there.
Absolutely. President of the American Farm Bureau Federation, Zippy Duvall, joining us here in Kansas City. Thanks again to Zippy for his time and insights while we were down there in Kansas City. If you'd like to learn more about the work of the American Farm Bureau and its contributions to the ag industry, you can always look them up online at the website fb.org. Well, it is now time to check in on the latest happenings when it comes to the grain markets. This week we have the opportunity to visit with Darin Newsom of Darin Newsom Analysis. Here's our conversation that took place on Wednesday afternoon. Let's get to the news of today. Wednesday afternoon, Congress has passed some legislation that has to do potentially with preventing the rail strike. What can you share with our viewers about that?
This is going to be interesting to watch to see how this plays out, because the big concern was what was going to happen if this rail strike actually went through? How are we going to get things moved with, the river system basically down due to low water levels, diesel supplies low. So it was a growing concern. And so, the Biden administration said, look, I understand the union's point of view, but quite frankly, the U.S. economy just simply can't have the rail system going on strike. So, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. This harkens back to the day, back to the days of FDR and so on. And like I said, we'll see how it works. We'll see if it actually goes through. I still think some agreement can be made between the industry and the unions. It's just going to take some time. And if anything, this should keep things running, as far as grain moving, oils moving, and energy's moving, and so on. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the coming weeks.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Darin, let's jump into the corn market here. It seems like we're kind of stuck in a sideways pattern. Would you agree with my assessment of that? And what can you share with us about the corn market?
Yeah, corn is comatose for right now. I mean, it has looking at the charts, the March contract has not broken out of its daily range posted on November 15th. Granted, that was a 20-some cent range, but we haven't moved out of that, since, over the last half of the month. So I'm not looking for it to do much of anything. There's no reason for folks to get overly excited about buying at this point or even selling at this point. We've already got, what we really have right here is a stalemate. We've got funds doing a little bit of selling because there's no reason for them to get excited about buying. And we've got the commercial side continuing to buy because we have tight supply. So what's happened is it's just a stalemate. We've got a consolidation going on, just a sideways pattern.
We'll get to soybeans here in a moment, but I want to get to a viewer question on Twitter. Rod asked a question this week. He was asking about, for the Western Corn Belt, what could basis look like in July of 2023? Really have to get your crystal ball out there, don't you?
Yeah, I really do. And as everyone knows, my crystal ball is relatively cracked. But, what we've got going on right now in the basis market is 2022-23 is actually running stronger than what we saw last year by about 20 to 30 cents. Now, if we recall last summer, June, July, we just saw basis explode. Well, if we're going to see that, if we're going to continue to run ahead of or above what we saw last year, we're going to have to see a couple of things happen. One, exports are going to have to pick up. The second half of the marketing year, so from March on is when we ship most of the corn out of the U.S., and we're going to have to see ethanol demand stay strong. The question is feed demand. If we continue to see cattle placements coming down, feed demand could start to slow the second half of the marketing year. So we may not have the same formula that pushed us to such extreme levels in 2021-22, but we should still be strong. May not be as strong as last year's basis when we get to next summer, but I'm still looking for basis to be strong.
Okay, Darin, the soy complex had a nice close today at the midweek. What is helping support that right now?
Biggest thing we've got going on right now, again, is strong demand. We have tight supplies. Our available stocks to use. I'll get that number when the cash indexes are calculated Wednesday evening. To post for the monthly updates. But right now we've got tight supplies and we've got strong demand. Exports are going along well. Crush is going along well. So we just have it's helping to support basis. Future spreads are telling us We should be looking for strong supply and demand, or bullish supply and demand, for most of the 2022-23 marketing year. The real key is what's going to happen with those March, May, July future spreads, is that's our best read on South American production, Brazilian production. And right now, those two spreads are still bullish. So still a lot of questions out there about what might come out of Brazil.
Darin, you have your own stocks to use calculation. Of course, you don't love to follow the USDA numbers, but what do you see in the stocks to use wise?
Yeah, what we've got going on here is the soybean situation has tightened considerably over the month of November. And so again, this reflects the type of exports that we've seen. Again, the type of crush that we've seen. It loosened up ever so slightly in corn, and this is something that we're going to have to watch. Cash market, actually a little lower at the end of November than it was October. So this tells us supply and demand loosened up a little bit. I don't see it as a huge warning sign right now. Again, basis is 20 cents stronger than it was last year at this time, but certainly something that we're going to have to watch. In wheat, we saw a considerable loosening of supply and demand. Cash markets are much lower than they were at this time last month, with the end of last month. So again, there's a concern in the wheat. We just have simply too many supplies right now to meet demand.
Yeah, Darin, want to get to another viewer question before we run out of time today. This one about the wheat market. They noted, a viewer wrote in, and he noted that he thought the wheat market was a bit undervalued, and asked if you saw potential upside as we move through these winter months.
Yeah, I think we could. Seasonally, the Kansas City, or the hard red winter wheat cash market, gains about 10% over those winter quarters. So say from Dece through February. But the problem is that we've got this year is an extremely bearish supply and demand situation in Chicago's soft red winter. We had the Dece March, almost pushing 90% calculated full commercial carry when Dece went into delivery. And so what I'm expecting is to see the March, May kind of follow that same path, move into the bearish territory. As far as reflecting bearish supply and demand. So that's going to keep a lid on the type of rally we could see. Yeah, if we start to see some demand pick up, if we start to see the world get interested in U.S. supplies, that could change things. But right now, we don't have the demand for the supplies that we do have on hand. And again, that might limit the buying interest over the winter.
Darin, final word is yours this week. What would you like to leave us with?
Yeah, there's so much going on. I know this is usually a quiet time of year, but there's a lot going on that we have to keep an eye on. From the problems going on in Russia and Ukraine, the rail strike here possibly in the U.S. It's all going to come down to how we get through this winter with the supplies that we have on hand, and if we can see some demand pick up in some of these key grain markets.
Darin, thanks for your time this week. We always enjoy hearing from Darin. We appreciate his time this week. Now, coming up next week, we'll be joined by Jeff Peterson of Heartland Farm Partners. If you have a question you'd like me to ask Jeff, be sure to email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll be sure to pass your question along. Well, Piper Farms near Richland, Nebraska recently built a new finishing barn. When they did so, they added one of the state's first robotic feeding systems for their beef cattle operation. Today, the system offers the family a more precise ration for their cattle, with automated feeding multiple times each day, improving feed efficiency and saving on labor. You can read all about this new robotic feeding system in the December issue of the Nebraska Farmer. Well, it is once again time for weather with Nebraska Extension AG Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Well, Al, when we're out at the Christmas tree farm, sure felt like Christmas with those frigid temperatures. Is the cold weather here to stay as we turn to the week ahead?
Well, Bryce, we have seen that roller coaster ride over this last week, and in fact, we did see a little bit of light accumulations of snowfall and a little bit of freezing drizzle across portions of eastern Nebraska during that Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. Looking at the cumulative snowfall totals, it looks like a broad-based 2 to 4 inch totals across the southern half of the Panhandle, portions of the southern Sandhills, and parts of northeast Nebraska. But as you move to the southeast of that region, it really dropped off significantly in a lot of locations in the trace amounts to in the inch and a half amount of snowfall. So we did see a little bit of precipitation, but nothing that's going to be a drought buster. And unfortunately, we're going to continue this roller coaster ride. We've got several more waves that are going to move through the region. The question is, can we get any significant moisture out of them? And right now, it doesn't look very promising. So let's go to the upper air models and see what we have in store. First thing I'll draw your attention to is that cold front that has come through, bringing the cold air, shifting through the state. We'll keep our temperatures fairly cool, at least for the first half of this weekend, as we'll be looking at primarily lower 30s northeast into the upper 30s to the southeast, and maybe even the low 40s across the southwest. But more importantly, as we go to tomorrow, we'll start to see that upper air trough moving toward the east. That's going to allow a little bit warmer weather into western Nebraska first, and then it'll eventually make it in to eastern Nebraska. But we'll be looking primarily at upper 30s across the northeast where the colder air is in place, lower 40s across much of southeast Nebraska. You get into southwestern Nebraska, we're probably pushing up into the mid to upper 40s. Unfortunately, we see that big trough over the western United States. That will start to become a player as we go into next week. And as we get into Monday, we're going to start to see that trough kind of stretching out, and then it will slide toward the east. So we're going to have some downsloping flow before this front comes in. So we'll start to see some clouds developing in western Nebraska. That'll bring our temperatures basically into the lower 40s to upper 30s. Farther toward the east, where we'll be a little bit more warmer air, we're probably still looking at the mid to upper 40s across the southern half of the state, and the upper 30s to low 40s across the northeast. And as we get into Tuesday, we'll start to see that trough starting to elongate, starting to shoot some Pacific moisture into the region. It doesn't look like much in the way of moisture, but we also have another cold front coming down with the northern stream that's going to be pushing through the North Dakota, South Dakota region. That's going to enforce the cold air, and we'll be looking at widespread temperatures dropping about 5 to 10 degrees across the state, and maybe even a little bit cooler as we get into the day on Wednesday. As we get the brunt of that cold air across eastern Nebraska, we'll start to warm up across western Nebraska. Nothing in the way of moisture to work with, so we're probably looking at more of flurries and light accumulations. I would expect if we see any accumulations, they'll be under 2 inches. As we get into Thursday, that trough off the west coast is going to rapidly shoot a piece of energy in the southern stream, and this one is going to come across Nebraska. So we are going to see a little bit of a warm up with that cold air dissipating out. We're also going to be dealing with some cloud cover. And with this cloud cover, we're probably going to hold our temperatures down a little bit across the southern part of the state, but we still should see 40s for pretty much the entire state. And as we get into Friday, the system rapidly moves across the state. Once again, we'll probably see light accumulations, but there is a potential, again, for freezing drizzle as we get warming air overrunning. So overall, going farther out, next Thursday, the following Tuesday, colder than normal conditions. And in terms of precipitation, pretty much near normal.
Thank you, Al. Finally today, a lack of precipitation has some producers taking a closer look at rotational grazing practices. Recently, Nebraska Extension held a cover crop grazing conference. It was at that event where we were able to get some insights on rotational grazing from Extension Educator Ben Beckman. Market Journal's Bill Dodd brings us this story.
As precipitation continues to elude many producers around the Cornhusker State, rotational grazing is beginning to become a more commonly utilized practice for cattle producers. This method of grazing allows producers to predetermine when and how much their cattle can graze on a particular area of a pasture.
A rotational grazing system is basically, instead of just turning the animals out onto a pasture or a field, in this case we're talking about grazing cover crops, just turning them out in the field and letting them graze the entire thing at once. Rotationally, we'd set that up into different maybe quadrants. We might even go into smaller paddocks and graze each of those individually for a certain amount of time. And so we can set that move up to react to maybe a certain growth point on the plant, how far we graze that down. We can do it kind of time-wise, but we're moving across that pasture in the, I guess, kind of a set way. Strip grazing, a lot of times, is a form of rotational grazing, but it gives us a little bit more flexibility. And so what we're doing from that standpoint, it's a little bit more intensive usually. What we typically do is we have some sort of framework, so maybe we'll have some permanent fences making a really long rectangle, and then we'll have a temporary electric fence that we will take a strip of that and portion it off and let the animals consume, and then we'll move that fence ahead and give them another strip, and we'll just kind of keep going forward. The beauty with that compared to more of a traditional rotational grazing, we pretty much usually have more permanent fences, and so we're pretty stuck on how much we can give the animals at once. We can manipulate it a little bit by how fast we move through that rotation, but strip-wise, we can keep our stocking densities up, keep the number of animals up, but we can adjust that to meet the animal demand. So if they're eating faster than what we have been giving them in the past, we can give them a little bit more, or maybe they aren't consuming everything, so we can make that strip a little bit smaller and adjust it accordingly.
While there are numerous challenges associated with implementing a rotational grazing system, there are also undeniable benefits that come along with this type of managerial decision.
Are we using a temporary electric fence system? Where's the energy source for that coming from? Do we have a proper fencer that's going to actually handle the animals that we have? Matching the time of year. If we're wanting to graze some stockpiled forage or something like that in the winter, putting temporary fence up and temporary step-in posts in frozen ground is a lot more difficult than putting it in ground that's thawed out and in the middle of the summer. So those are some of the difficulties that we start adding into the system when we're looking at doing some rotational grazing and those sorts of things. But from a benefit standpoint, we're taking the nutrients and we're putting it right back onto the field. Yeah, we're taking a little bit off in animal growth, but from urine and manure deposits around the field, we're basically refertilizing without having to do the extra work. And we're also harvesting without having to do the extra work. So anytime that we can kind of move the cow in, we're killing two birds with one stone there, and we're not having to go out and windrow and then wait for it to dry and then bale and move those bales off the field and then store them somewhere and then feed them back out at a later point. There's a time and a place for that, and it's definitely valuable, but if we can have the cow do all that for us, that's a lot of man hours, that's a lot of labor, that's a lot of wear and tear on equipment, that's a lot of fuel that we're saving.
As summers in Nebraska continue to be hot and dry, implementing a rotational grazing plan into your operation will help improve grazing uniformity while simultaneously giving your forages and grasses more time to recuperate by allowing root systems to grow healthier and deeper into the soil. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thank you for that information, Bill. If you'd like to learn more on cover crops or rotational grazing or even strip grazing, you can find out anything you'd like over on the website beefwatch.unl.edu. Well, that is going to do it for this week's show. Be sure you've subscribed to Market Journal on YouTube to catch up on any content that you might have missed. Coming up next week, we'll be joining you from the Nebraska Ag Expo in Lincoln. If you're planning on being there and happen to see us out and about, feel free to stop by and say hi. We hope to see you right back here next time. Until then, I'm Bryce Duskett, wishing you a safe and productive week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.